Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. Like and subscribe. This is Manny, and I'm here with Matt. I'm here with Jim Johnson, of project manager, Star Trek Adventures, the role-playing game for Modiphius Entertainment. There's some exciting stuff we have to share with you. That I don't know if we're the first, but one of the first, definitely. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing well, Manny. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Manny. Thanks for having me on the show again. I love coming onto your show, talking about all things, RPG, Star Trek, etc. It's just I'm grateful for all you do for the industry and for Modiphius and for Star Trek Adventures, of course. But just excited to be here to talk about this new product.
Okay, so what is this new product? You sent this PDF. It was quite a surprise. Why don't you introduce it?
Yeah, hopefully it's a surprise. Hopefully it was a pleasant surprise.
Yes, it was.
But yeah, so
confusing at first, but yes.
Yeah. You've all been so gracious with your reviews and your ability to talk about the different books that we've been doing. Either just a broad overview or just chapter by chapter. I wanted to pay it forward, spread the love a little bit, give you an exclusive, well, not exclusive, but a very key preview of this book. This is a new release that we're bringing out here this year. This is a we're calling it Captain's Log. This is a solo RPG version of Star Trek Adventures. So that's the big news. We've kept this under our hat for quite a long time. We've had it in development for quite a while, and kind of experimenting here, testing the waters to see if we can just kind of like spring it on people and see what happens. Not normally something we would do, but we just thought we'd take a shot here and just see what happens.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising. Yeah, I was looking through the files and I wasn't quite sure what I was looking at first.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not really very familiar with solo role playing as a separate thing. I know back in the 80s and everything, lots of kids ran themselves through D&D modules because they couldn't get a hold of any friends. But now it seems to be a growing trend to design games to be run solo. So the scenarios and the rules are all geared towards that.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Manny.
I'm sorry. No, my experience is that I noticed there was a trend recently of these solo role-playing games, and at first I was like, I don't know about this. So, and then I realized that what this is actually, at least this is how I perceive it, is these old school choose your own adventure books. I remember there was these certain choose your own adventure books where you could use dice with it and everything, and those were fantastic. And so I started looking at them, and there was I reviewed the RuneQuest starter set, and that had a solo adventure. And it kind of dawned on me that these solo adventures are not only great to play and kind of reminds me of those books I used to read when I was younger, but it's also a really good almost doorway to a certain system to get the feel of the game.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, Jim, what was the how did this come to be, this project? What led to for these books to be made?
Yeah. So there, like you mentioned, there is a growing trend in the RPG world for solo RPGs. Especially we noticed this during the pandemic, even before the pandemic, but especially during the pandemic. A lot of people were stuck at home, right? Unable to get out and go to their game store, unable to go to their friends' houses for a while to be able to play games. And there was a real demand for games that people could play either with one or two players or just play by themselves, right? Because they just could not, either they couldn't find somebody to run it for them, or they couldn't find anybody to play with them if they wanted to run it. Or just as with life, as we get to be adults, constraints on our time get to be stronger and stronger, and all of a sudden the time you had to play games frequently goes away, right? Or changes, and you just have to figure out the dynamic. People come and go from games collapse, all that stuff. So all these different things are going on, right? And then in the RPG circle, different solo RPGs that come out, like Ironsworn, Starforged. There are a number of other ones. I don't have them off the top of my head, but those are the two that I can remember immediately because I play them myself, right? Just to do some journaling and do some solo RPGing. And I've also noticed that a lot of bookcase games, especially historical bookcase games, the more recent ones, a lot of them are starting to develop these rule sets where it actually kind of makes the opponent a series of tables, so that if you're playing it by yourself, there's actually a setup of there's like a rule system in place where you can actually roll on the tables, and it'll dictate what your opponent is doing in these bookcase games. So you can play it by yourself, or you can play, with another player or whatever. And that's just a really interesting concept, that like you can actually play a really detailed board game by yourself using the rules to help you support that. And the solo RPGs that I've seen by and large do the same thing, where you create a character and then you start a story, and whether it's like you come up with an inciting incident, or you just rely on the probability tables or the oracles, or like whatever that game calls it, right? There, all the random tables that are built into the book that will help prompt you to figure out what's the next scene, or what's the next story point, or what's the next plot point. Or if you need a random adversary to throw your way, you just roll on a random table, and then that'll help spark your creativity. So it's kind of an evolution of the choose your own adventure books that we were talking about earlier, where the choose your own adventure books are they're a canned adventure, right? You're not really creating anything new. You're just flipping from page to page, and you roll some dice, and success you go to page 88, and failure you go to page 116, and you just kind of rotate it that way. The solo RPG is an evolution of that, to where instead of going to a specific page and reading what happens, you are rolling on some random tables, trying to get in the pieces in your head, and then using your own imagination, you're telling the story yourself. So it's almost like guided fiction in a way, where you're in Star Trek, you've got a Star Trek character, and you've created your ship, right? So you've got a ship, you got a character, you got your setting, you're good to go to start creating story. And hopefully the tables and stuff that are in the book will help spark your imagination, so that you're actually telling your own, if you want to call it like fan fiction or journaling, or like there's a couple of different ways of phrasing it, right? But this is an opportunity for you to tell your own Star Trek story at your own pace, right? You don't need another player, you don't need a game master kind of like setting the scene and guiding you through it. You can literally, grab this book and your favorite writing implements of your choice, and go to a coffee shop, or just find a place that you like to hang out at, and just write and be creative, and do a Star Trek story. If you've got one in your head, and you want, or if you want the game to kind of like help guide you into an amazing story. There's a lot of places you can go with this. So that was the overall idea, I think. And just a few years ago, or actually a couple years ago, we just saw that solo RPGs were a thing, right? And we knew that the 2D20 system, especially for Star Trek Adventures, was slanted pretty heavily to the narrative already, right? I mean, there is some crunch to the system, but depending on how you play it, and it's like my group, we play it almost like a radio drama every week, right? Like literally, there are times when we're just not rolling dice, we're just narrating what's happening. I'll throw, as a game master, I'll throw some situations at them, and then just see how the characters react, and then just by doing like yes and we just build a story from there. And then of course dice rolling at strategic moments to see if they succeed or fail at tasks, or if there's complications, or if they decide to spend some momentum for advantages or something, right? So we just really leaned into that narrative approach, and we streamlined the 2D20 system that's already existing, that Nathan developed, won some awards. It's a solid system. We decided we could probably streamline this and turn it into a narrative focused RPG that people could play by themselves, and that's what Captain's Log is essentially. So really curious to see how people react to it, and then I'm excited to hear your reactions too, Matt, where you said you just didn't really quite know what you were looking at. It's a new thing for you, and that's exciting, because hopefully we can get it in front of you.
You did a really good job of explaining it. I mean, I read the book, and now I know this. And obviously I haven't had a chance to try it out. I just got it the other day.
Sure.
But I was really impressed, and I was really it seemed really interesting. It the first thing I thought of was character generation in the Traveler game.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever played the old Traveler RPG, you had this really involved life path system where you took your character through his life, and you rolled dice to get you the different positions, and you made decisions about where you were going to go. And my friends and I discovered that you could play that as a whole mini game. I mean, the idea was to do that and then make characters and then go into the role playing. But you could just keep your characters from adolescence to retirement. You could just keep going all the way through. And so we did that a couple of times, and it was a lot of fun. And in a way, that's kind of the feeling I got here, because you make some initial decisions, or you roll on these tables. Actually, you roll on the probability matrix, which is going to be the most Star Trek name for a random table I've ever heard. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm constantly impressed with how wonderfully you capture the flavor of Star Trek. Not just the rules and the lore, but the mindset. The probability matrix is so Star Trek. Practically technobabble. It's great. I love the fact that you can roll on these tables and then use those to create everything, the whole game. The setting, the era, your character, your ship, and then the scenes and the missions, and you can plot out a whole game using these charts and then your interpretation of them. I thought that was great. I also love the way the game really focuses on one character. The default is the captain, right? It's the captain's log. And I thought the book did a wonderful job of focusing on the one character, and the system does a good job. I like the fact that the ships and the enemies and even your crew don't really have stats of their own. They only have enough staff to interact with the captain. And I love the way as a captain, you can, use your crew. You can say, okay, I'm going to let the medical guys handle that. And they're going to take a roll to see how the medical department deals with the plague, whatever. I just thought that was really nicely done, really well put together, and really well explained, because like I said, this is kind of a new thing. And so it takes a lot of explaining to some of us.
Sure. Yeah. That's great thoughts. Manny, did you have, you look like you were going to say something. I did want to interrupt you.
Well, so as one of the viewers who know, Jim did send this to us previously, but I did not look through this. I want to be completely, utterly surprised. I want my reaction to be genuine, and I'm kind of mind blown a bit. I when I saw the cover and I sort of read like a brief description of what it was inside, I assume it was, like I mentioned, like a choose your own adventure type of thing, which I would have been very, very happy with. But this is a much more, I'm hearing what you said about making a character, making a starship, and then you're kind of creating these adventures. So this is not a stoic thing where you read a book and like some solo RPGs, there's already a character made for you. You're just kind of following and going to page. But this is extremely fluid. It could anything can happen because you're making it along with the book.
Yeah.
And what's great is that for those of you not familiar with fan fiction, I think everyone knows what fan fiction is. I'd be surprised, especially if you're into Star Trek, you don't know what fan fiction is. Because if I heard it's true, the first fan fiction started out with Star Trek. When the series ended, and people start writing their own stories and so forth. If that's true, I have to double check with some experts, see if that's if that's right.
Fan fiction, as we understand it, started with Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah, I think. I'm certainly not an expert on it, but I think largely, yes, Star Trek was one of the early IPs that fans were able to write to, and it's tangential to this conversation. But I think Star Trek was also the originator of slash fiction, if you're familiar with that. That's a subset of fan fiction, but we don't have to go into that detail. I just want to make a note that I think Star Trek was the first for that as well.
The original Mary Sue, the actual Lieutenant Mary Sue, came from a piece of
Star Trek. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
We have Star Trek to thank for so many things. But
yeah,
Manny, Manny, I am excited to hear that. Well, first I am pleasantly surprised that you had the willpower to not look at this thing until now, until we're recording, and that's impressive in itself. Because I'd be like, oh, new Star Trek, let me see it right now, right? That's just my perspective. But I'm also kind of excited to hear that your mind is just kind of blown, that you're like trying to take in the totality of what we're dropping on you here. And I think as much as we've read and thinking, okay, solo RPGs are a thing and people are like them and they're popular, I think in the bigger like RPG zeitgeist, or the meta, whatever you want to call it, I don't think solo RPGs have really penetrated to a lot of places like beyond the internet, right? I think the internet is really, really strong on people doing Twitches and YouTubes and TikToks and blogging journals and all kinds of stuff like that, doing their own RPGs, which is amazing and totally awesome. I'm just not sure how much it's creeping out into the general, non-internet gaming populace. Because I know for a fact there's got to be thousands and thousands and thousands of gamers out there happily playing their games, and they're just not engaging online, right? In fact, I know that for Star Trek, because I know I've seen our sales figures, and then I see like the number of people on Reddit or Discord or whatever, and there's this huge disparity between that. It's like, okay, so clearly the vast majority of people playing games are just not talking about it online. I mean, even if I've looked at like RPGNet or NWorld, and does Wizards of the Coast still have forums? I'm not even sure anymore. I'm guessing they do. Like the numbers of people on those forums has got to be minuscule compared to the number of books that they've sold and people out there playing the game, right? That's just the reality. So I literally have zero idea how many people are out there in the world happily playing solo RPGs on their own, right? And just not talking about it online. I mean, who knows? It's just impossible to guess. And yeah, hopefully they're having fun with it, right?
Well, I can see with this could be the I can see a bridge between fan fiction writers and gamers with this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut Matt off. I'll talk more about that later.
No, actually, to follow up what you were saying, Manny, the book is actually quite explicit about that. It really, in some of the later chapters there, it basically presents itself as a writing tool. It talks about journaling. It encourages you. The captain's log isn't just a catchy title. They want you to write a captain's log. And they tell you how to write a captain's log, and they encourage you to write down your adventures and possibly write stories and shows and blogs, and the game really presents itself as a creative writing tool as well as a game. So it's really, there's so much to it. It's really an interesting project. And one thing I also like is that it's presented as a solo game, but there are variations for you to play it with other people as well, with or without a game master. So you could actually try, if you have a gaming group, you can play this with your gaming group. If you play Star Trek Adventures, this book might actually, be worth picking up, even if you don't want to use the simpler system, just for these tables. I mean, there are so many tables and they're just so useful for generating locations and plots and missions and every part of Star Trek. So, as a GM tool, it could be really useful.
So
go ahead, Manny.
So I'm curious, when it comes to the creation of this, who are the writers? Who was the writing team behind this?
So the writing team behind it, it's if you're familiar with the Star Trek Adventures, of course, it's most of the same cast of characters. Plus, I dug deep for my usual. I try really hard to make sure that my group of writers and my development team are just as diverse as possible, and I'm just lucky that I've got great people on my team that are diverse all across every spectrum that you can think of. And I think that's important because it's Star Trek, right? And I think the more representation we can get into the people actually making the games, the more other people are going to, fans are going to be able to identify with it and say, oh, this is a game for everybody. It's not just for, middle-aged white guys like me. It's for everybody. And Michael Dismuke, he's a writer on Star Trek. He's written a bunch of stuff for us and for me. And he's also my co-host on the Continuing Conversations podcast that we do every week. But at the time I was developing this book, I had 4 other major projects on my plate at the same time. And I just realized I can't possibly do all 4 of these by myself. I need some help. So I got him as a lead writer on this one. And we brought in a few other folks. Allison Side, Samantha Webb is Modiphius. So she helped me develop the initial, she actually came to me with the initial concept of a solo RPG version of Star Trek. And then she had to move on to other things, but she helped, kind of just like set the baseline of what was possible. Rachel Cruz, Nathan Dowdell, Keith Garrett, John Kennedy, Fred Love, Chris McCarver. I could go through the list. I don't know that you need all the names, but if you're familiar with Star Trek Adventures over the last few years, you'll see the same names popping up in the credits, plus new faces. And I just try to keep that going. Like I rely on I rely on the people that I know can deliver, right? Because obviously they can deliver on time and on budget and everything else. And that's a godsend as an editor, because like if I can give somebody an assignment and I don't have to worry about whether they're going to be on time or whether it's going to be competently written, then that's just a confidence booster for me that I'm going down the right way. Sure. So yeah, usual group of Star Trek Adventures people. I don't know how many people even focus on the writers. I mean, as a writer myself, I always want to think someone's looking at us, looking at the books and seeing who actually wrote it. But for the most part, I'm going to guess that our fan base knows that we're delivering really good Star Trek content, and that's enough, right? Like if they're seeing it because certain people are writing it, that's a bonus, right? But so usual cast of characters. We have 7 years worth of artwork that we're able to pull on, and plus we got Paramount's archives that we can lean on. So we've got just a ton of art that you're already familiar with, or maybe not, depending on which products you've got. Just a big cast of people brought involved. I mean, it was 10, 12, 14 people, and it's a big team. It's a lot of cat herding for me, but I think just getting all those manuscript pieces together and pulling it into a cohesive whole. And then for this one in particular, a lot of play testing, right? Because we were streamlining the 2D20 system, and we had to figure out how do we streamline it and still make it work without breaking it, right? Without taking something out that was really, really important, and then then does everything just collapse like a house of cards, or does it stay pretty well together? And I want to think that we found the sweet spot of streamlined 2D20s to make it accessible and fun, but also like what Matt was saying, it could be an on-ramp to the full version of the game if you wanted to. Like the character generation in this game is almost identical to the life path that's in Star Trek Adventures. We've just streamlined it a little bit and taken out talents completely, right? So we don't use talents in this version of the game because it's really more focused on the narrative as opposed to the mechanics. But we also include conversion rules in here. So like if you want to go from Captain's Log to Star Trek Adventures, you can do it pretty easily. And the other way, if you're playing Star Trek Adventures and you're not getting enough Star Trek in your life and you want to go take your character and go do some Captain's Log stuff, then we gave you conversion rules to go the opposite direction too. So both directions is pretty easy, I think. It'll just be interesting to see how players get into it and think about it. But what's funny is like the more I look at this book now that it's in a complete format, like it was hard for me to wrap my head around it a little bit when I was doing the manuscript and I was doing the editing and I was seeing it all come together in Word documents. The totality of the project didn't really hit me until it was in layout, and then I actually saw the book, and then I actually got the print proof pages, and I could actually see it coming together as a book that I could actually flip through and look at. I was like, oh man, there's so many spin-off things that you can do with this that I wasn't even conceiving of. And as me and the writing team talk about it, and we're starting to work through some interviews like this, and then just late at night as I'm randomly thinking about things, there's just so many ways that you can go with this creatively. The big light bulb for me the other day, and I won't bore you or the listeners too much, but the big light bulb for me was like, oh, you don't even necessarily have to focus on the characters for this game. Like you could create, because like in the game, it's expected that you're going to create a character and then you're going to create a ship or a station, right? You got to have some sort of setting for your adventures, whether it's a ship or a station. And I was like, oh, you could make the ship the focus of your stories. Like maybe you want to create the Excelsior and you want to say, okay, I'm going to tell 20 stories all about the Excelsior's lifespan, right? And I'm going to start. First captain was Captain Styles, of course, that we saw in Star Trek 3. So then you do a couple of Captain's Log adventures with Captain Styles, and then maybe he goes off and gets promoted to admiral, or maybe retires, and then you bring in a new captain. And the focus of your story is still on the ship, right? And then you spend 20 years, or 20 episodes or whatever you want, just focusing on the ship, and have a rotating crew if you want. So that was the big light bulb for me. It's like, oh, you could play this focusing on a character, but there's no reason you couldn't focus it on a ship or a station. Like maybe you could do a whole like DS9 kind of storyline where you're really just focusing on the station and the comings and goings and the people who've come and gone, and make them all like minor characters or something. So there's a lot of interesting ways you could play with this.
You might be able to even focus on an event like the Indian War. You can like tell stories about the war, and you rotate in different ships and different captains and crews and
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, man. I haven't gotten quite to that level yet. But you could create like a broad brush event, like you want to tell a whole bunch of anthology stories about the Romulan War, right? Like the Romulan War that happened right after Enterprise. Maybe you want to do a whole bunch of anthology stories about that, and you come up with different ships and crews, over and over again. Yeah, sure, why not? In fact, that sparks me thinking, if you're going to do a big storyline like that, why not get like 2 or 3 people together, and they're all doing their own individual ships and individual stories, but they're all tied to that common theme.
Together. Oh wow, yeah.
I mean, it got this, and like in some of our other books, we talk about like an admiralty style campaign where you're instead of you being the captain of a ship, you're an admiral responsible for several ships, right? So you could totally do that here too. I don't know that we talked about that necessarily, but you could play an admiral character, and like every story that you run through could be a different captain and a different ship, all oriented toward the same mission or the same. I don't know. Gosh, there's so many directions you could go with it.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm excited now, Matt. You got my creativity sparking all over again in all kinds of different directions. So that's cool.
That's great. Now, this is a really, really fascinating project.
Yeah.
Or product for sparking ideas.
Yeah, and I'll admit, like I'm a little nervous because we did almost zero, pre talking about this. We kept it under a hat for a long time, and I'm willing to bet the vast majority of the fan bases had no idea this was coming, right? And I'll just be curious to see how it hits. Like I know Modiphius, especially with Star Trek, we like to surprise people once in a while and drop these little surprise goodies out there. For a major project like this, though, this is an experiment. Certainly, I'm not sure we would do this again because it's not. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see how it goes. I hope it does well. I definitely got potential.
Yeah, because we didn't really talk about the first chunk of the book, and I know we'll go chapter by chapter later, but we have a pretty broad brush as far as the audience we're trying to target with this book. Like the first, like maybe almost the first third of this book is all about Star Trek. What makes Star Trek amazing? What makes Captain's Log amazing? Here's some information about the setting. And I think we did that really because what we're really targeting are new fans, like new Star Trek fans, casual Star Trek fans, casual gamers who are curious about the game. Maybe they're curious about Star Trek Adventures, or maybe they're just creative and they're Star Trek fans and they just don't have an outlet for that creativity. Like there's very limited opportunities right now for writers to get into Star Trek, whether it's novels or short stories or even television, right? There's just not that many avenues, especially if you're not agented, right? It's really hard to find that break. And certainly I am happy to, invite new writers all the time in to write for Star Trek Adventures. But even then I have my limits, right? Because I can only take so many pitches before I have to stop to read all the pitches I've got. And then I've also got a production schedule, and there's only so many slots I can fill in with stuff. So as much as I want to give everybody a new opportunity to write for Star Trek, even if it's just Star Trek Adventures, there's only so many things you can do with it. But with this kind of a product, we're like, there is no limitation. I mean, you could literally write any Star Trek story you want. And, if you want to share it with people, because that's one of the fun things about Star Trek in particular, where you were talking, Matt, at the top about how Star Trek, by and large, invented fan fiction. people were writing Star Trek stories because they wanted to share them with each other, right? That's what the fans do. They love this property so much, they wanted to tell their own stories about Kirk and Spock and everybody else. And then gradually, fan fiction grew into, I'm going to create other characters and other ships and other situations. And then that expanded. And then you bring in the RPGs like from FASA and Last Unicorn Games and stuff. And now people are creating their own ships, own situations. And it just blew up from there and just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think this is just another opportunity to expand the Star Trek, universe even further, to where people can have fun, and their own character and ship is every bit as valid as anything you've seen in canon and anything else that anybody else has created over the last 56 years or whatever. And I'll admit, I am, I don't know if I'm selfish about it, but I am super pumped, because once this book gets out into the public, I am hungry. Like, I'm a whale reader, so I read all the time. In whatever spare time I have, I'm trying to read. I've got my Kindle. I've got resources online that I constantly am filling my brain with new story, whether it's great, middling, good, whatever. I want to read story, and I want to read new authors, and especially if it's Star Trek, right? Because I love Star Trek stories. Even I got so many Star Trek books on my Kindle these days. It's ridiculous. But I'm just so excited at the idea that people could write their own Star Trek stories and find a way to share them, whether it's on I don't know, Wattpad or a blog or TikTok. I don't know what other venues there are out there for sharing short fiction. I know there's a bunch out there.
I think there's going to be a lot of blogs. I think this game's going to give rise to a lot of blogs.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm just excited to see more Star Trek out there, and if this is a tool that can help make that happen, then that's a win for me, man.
Yeah, I can see the fanfic community be really excited about this. Oh, and I should say this. I should make a quick correction. I would say Star Trek. What about modern fan fiction? I believe Sherlock Holmes was the first time when we start seeing fan fiction, especially since the writer didn't care anymore about his stories. But that's a different.
Well, it depends on how you want to go off topic. Depends on how you want to define it, because people were writing knockoff Dickens stories during Dickens' life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Someone wrote a sequel to the Pickwick Papers, and because copyright wasn't particularly across the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really an enforceable thing, so people were just making up stories.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
characters and plots. So
you could go even further back, Shakespeare and his peers. They were borrowing pretty heavily from all kinds of drama from back in the day, and I don't know that you would necessarily translate. I don't know that you would necessarily classify any of it as fanfic per se, but certainly they were inspired by playwrights who came before them, and then plenty of other playwrights were inspired by them afterwards. But people have been borrowing stories and being inspired by stories back and forth, and I'm willing to bet certain characters were just ported out of one place into another place, and the audience got it because the audience knew the characters from all the different plays and stuff. But it makes me wonder, I wonder if anybody out there has done like a doctorate thesis on Shakespearean, or I guess Elizabethan theater, and whether that would be classified as fanfic of some sort. And I'm gonna have to do some. I'm gonna have to go down the rabbit hole of the internet and see if anybody's done it.
That's a rabbit hole right there.
But I think that's why I think this product is so wonderful, because it taps into this. Looks like this human nature of this need to keep creating the stories that we love, so they can keep evolving and changing with us as well. Mm-hmm. That this allows you to kind of connect with that. So you can look at it as a game, but it's sort of like it could be a tool for game masters if they want to all right. So I don't do it as much as I used to, but back in the day, I used to write so much my own world and tons of I used to have notebooks of the worlds I would make and the characters and NPCs, which no one saw the light of day of, and but it's stuff like this helps kind of all right, I want to build a background for something. Let me write a story. Let me put something together, and this is a good tool for that. Because who knows what you may create, and you could bring that into your game in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think The more I look at it, the more, Michael and I talked about it. We were like, boy, there's so many use cases, and not to get, businessy language you speaky here, but like, there's so many potential use cases in this book that, and we're still discovering them. Like, I don't think we had a short list when we were developing the book, but now like we've been adding more and more and more, and like, oh crap, boy, what have we created here? This is like going 10, 20 different directions. Like, is it even focused? What's that, Matt?
I said you've opened the floodgates.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I mean, unintentionally, that's kind of what we stumbled into, I think. But I'm really curious to see like what the fans think of it, and then how they start using it. Because you're absolutely right. This could be an excellent game master tool, I think, for like those game masters who really like random tables. We traditionally haven't used a lot of random tables in Star Trek Adventures, although in more recent products we've been leaning into it a little bit more. Like there's quite a few in Lower Decks, because we thought it was a good place to put in the Lower Decks campaign guide. We put quite a few random tables in there, partly because we knew that the series in itself was kind of random. Like if you watch the characters, like Beck, like Mariner and Boimler and stuff, like the things that happens to those characters in a given episode, pretty random, right? And then they deal with it, and then they resolve it. I was like, you know what, we need to bring that kind of goofy random element into things. So we did that for Lower Decks, and we've strategically used random tables here and there in other places. And in some circles online about people talking about the game, they're like, oh, we want more. And it reminded me of back in the day in the 80s when I was like, doing D&D and Star Frontiers and Marvel superheroes and stuff. Like random tables was more of a thing back then, especially for like dungeon creation. Like I remember there was plenty of times where my group just couldn't get together to game, and I was like, well, I'm a game master and I'm also a player, but I'm bored. I need something to do. And I would crack open the books, like you were saying, Manny, and just start rolling random tables, and I would create dungeons, and I'd create stories, and I'd create situations. And it's like, well, I'm never going to actually run this. I'm never going to run my group through this dungeon because just the timing didn't work out or whatever. But I created it, and it's this cool thing, and it's like, oh, there's all these traps and treasures and monsters and stuff. But absolutely, those random tables were a creative tool to help me create something. And then, as I evolved as a writer and as I evolved as a storyteller, sometimes random tables weren't as important because I just had it, by then a lot of it had sunk in. But now with Star Trek, with this, Captain's Log, I think writers and game masters who need that little extra kick to get some creativity going, maybe they've got a block and they just can't quite get through it. Grab a couple random tables, roll some dice. Because it's still a game, right? So roll some dice, get your 2d20s rolling and working, and see what comes up. And then even if there's something on the table, maybe you don't like your result, and you're like, oh, that's kind of dumb. But hey, here's this other one on the table, and now I'm excited. And then maybe that'll spark your imagination, and you're up and running. And that's ultimately what it is. It's a tool to help spark your imagination. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I did want to mention though, it is a game too. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is like initially when I was first reading through this and getting ready to do play testing, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go through the life path. I'll create my character. I'll create my ship, and then I'll start playing. And now I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe I'll just let the dice completely decide everything. I'll just make a completely random character going through the life path, but randomly rolling on every single event and every single stage of the life path, and just see what I come up with. And then I'll create a completely random ship that he or she has been assigned to, he or she or they have been assigned to, and then I'll just see what happens, and just like totally let the book guide me through whatever happens. And I'm kind of excited. I'm a little nervous because like as a writer, I like to be in a little bit more control of like what's coming up and what's happening. But I'm kind of excited to just lean into the game aspect of it and just let the dice fall where they will, and see what happens. So I'll do that at some point. I'm not sure if I'll preserve it for posterity, but I'll certainly give it a try.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic way to play. That's how I would be tempted to do it. I love those kind of random tables, making characters. What I love doing is trying to make sense of the roles. Right? Like you get you roll two different things, and you say, oh, those don't make any sense. My character, I don't know. He's a noble, but he has no diplomacy or anything.
Yeah.
Right? Well, how did that happen? What happened to his? And you're like, well, maybe he was he has, I don't know, anger issues, or in Star Trek, maybe he's possessed by an alien. I like trying to make sense of the roles, and
yeah.
to me, that's the exciting part, or an exciting part.
I'm excited for that too. I think I played a lot of Pendragon. I don't know if either of you have played Pendragon, but one of the things I love about Pendragon that Greg Stafford built into it is that each character has has kind of like a values system, right? So they have a set of values, I think 13 values, and they're on a scale. And so you might be chaste or lustful or brave or cowardly, or they're opposing values, right? And when your character gets into a situation, sometimes you have to roll on one of those values, and based on that result, the character might do something that you as a player would not necessarily want them to do, right? Because it's their character, and they're leaning one way or another, and you just have to accept it. You just have to roll with it, because you're not them per se, right? They're a character. And in Captain's Log, you can kind of do the same thing, where like you just like in Star Trek Adventures, you create values for your character, like what's important to them, what's really important to them, what's meaningful to them, what will they fight for, what matters to them. But if you add that to the probability matrix, where you got you're in a situation, is there a high probability of a thing happening, is there a low probability of a thing happening, is it neutral, whatever, if you really don't know how your character would react to that situation, rely on the table, like roll on the probability matrix and then just go with whatever happens, right? Just like accept the result and then go with it and just see what happens next. And I love that idea, even though it's a little antithetical to like how I normally role play, where it's like, no, this is my character, I know what I'm going to do, and go from there.
I think that's really interesting. I think that's a really fascinating way to look at it, because at first you think, okay, it's a solo role-playing game, so it's one player and no GM.
Right.
But you could kind of look at it as a GM and no players. Right? You could treat your captain like an NPC. You could say, well, what's what are they going to do? Not me, him. What's he going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Roll out, So that you kind of separate yourself a little bit.
Yeah. So, interesting idea. I like it. Yeah, it's just another great idea just off the dome. Good stuff, man. Manny, I think we may have interrupted you, Manny. I apologize.
No, it's all right. Sorry, I just want to be clear about something. It looks like and we'll actually let our viewers make sure they're clear about this as well. I think we sort of mentioned it real fast. So there are 4 distinct books of the Captain's Log. There's the Next Generation, Voyager, Original Series, and Discovery. So if in case anyone's curious about which one to pick up, because they might love all Star Trek, is there, besides the tone of the game, is there any other differences between each book?
No, actually there is no difference other than the cover. We wanted to try something a little different with this one, and we thought, well, the unfortunate reality of Star Trek is that it's a 56-year-old property, and there are 11 series and 13 movies or whatever. So the fan base is not unified. Like, there's not just a Star Trek fan base necessarily, right? You've got original series fans, next gen fans, DS9 fans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like, there's a lot of crossover within that, right? To where some people might say, I just like Star Trek. I like all Star Trek. Like, I like all Star Trek, even though I lean toward DS9 and Voyager and Next Gen more than anything else. I still love everything Star Trek, right? But knowing that there is a wide variety, again, we're going to harkening to IDIC, right? There's infinite diversity, infinite combinations. Everybody likes something a little different. You're never going to please everybody. So with this product, we thought, well, let's experiment. Let's try something different that we haven't really done before, except maybe with Utopia Planitia. With Utopia Planitia, we did do 3 covers for that book. We did a collector's edition, next gen style. We did a collector's edition, original series style, and then we did a standard cover, just to see what the market would do. Like, is this cool? Does it suck? Like, what's the deal? And so we thought we'd try it again, and we said, well, okay, so Captain's Log, it's targeted at casual fans, hardcore gamers, hardcore Star Trek fans, like a little bit of everybody, right? And we're like, well, why don't we just see what happens if we offer a few different cover variants, just to see what happens, right? Because we had the means, we had the budget, and we set it up intentionally that way. instead of doing like a collector's edition cover, we thought let's do 4 standard covers. So fans, you'll see there's an original series cover that has the original series, Kirk Delta on it. And then there's one with next gen with the next gen Delta. There's a DS9 / Voyager cover that has the DS9 logo, or that comm badge that has the rectangle instead of the circle. And then there's a Discovery comm badge from the first 2 seasons of Discovery. And we just thought, why not? Let's give it a try. These are going to be hard. These are hardcover Royal Digests, so the same size as the Player Guide and Game Master Guide, because we wanted it to be portable and we wanted it to be easy to be thrown into a bag or a backpack or something, and portable so that you can take it to wherever you like to go write or to be creative or whatever. And it's also easy to sit down with, right? Like, one of the things that I am frustrated about our traditional 8.5 by 11 hardback RPG books is that they're kind of unwieldy to read in bed, right? Like, they're just awkward. And then you get into like the weird ones that are landscaped, and it's like, oh, how do I even hold this thing? I can't maneuver, right? But a smaller like digest size, it's just a little easier on the hands to flip through. Of course, if you're getting it digitally, then that's less of an issue because you can just read it on your tablet or whatever, right? But yeah, so the books are identical except for the covers, right? The only difference is the cover. So I want to make sure that fans know, we're not doing different things for each series within the book. We just wanted to give you some options as a Star Trek fan. Like, what's your favorite series? Is it Next Gen? Is it DS9? Is it original series? So hopefully you feel a little bit of connection to that series by buying the book that's thematically, at least the cover, thematically linked. I mean, the interior is all the same because it's just unbelievably cost prohibitive to do 4 different versions of the book with the interior and the exterior. I mean, that'd be 4 completely separate products, right? And that was just not going to happen. We didn't have that kind of time or willingness to make that kind of investment to do like a dedicated original series version, a dedicated next gen version, etc. I think we packed the book so full of stuff that's universally appealable to Star Trek across the 1,000 years that's covered in the timeline, that hopefully people will be able to pick the cover they like. Or if you're like me and you're a collector, you might just buy a couple of them or buy them all because why not, right? But I'm not going to certainly no one's forced to do that, but like I can't help myself, and I love Star Trek, so I might do that.
I agree with you. I like those small sizes.
Mm-hmm.
So, nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Player's Guide and Master's Guide ones are fantastic. They're great to take around and show to people, and especially if they're not if they're cautious about Star Trek for some reason, or not. There's so much. Again, you mentioned it's like is it 56 years of Star Trek?
Yeah.
Wow. So I could see someone could be like, "Oh man, do I have to know all of this to play?" And I said, "No, just give them the book," and they're like, "Oh, okay, they'll get the gist of it pretty fast."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, that's something. No, go ahead.
Oh, probably the most important question: when will this be out?
So even though we're recording this episode early, by the time this episode airs, the book will be available for pre-order on Modiphius' website. So, pre-order the print book, you get the PDF right away. The final PDF is ready to go. So it's not like a playtest version. It's not like a early intro version, like a truncated early version. It's the full-blown book in PDF format, ready to go. So you get that as a thank you for pre-ordering. And then barring any surprises in the global supply chain, this book should be at Gen Con this year. So August 3rd is the global release date. We expect it to be available anywhere that you can buy games, with the caveat that some regions don't get the books speedily through distribution. That's just the reality of the global supply chain. So like Australia, Japan, not to say outliers, but the places that are far away from the UK and America, it may take a little longer to get the books to you. But yeah, pre-orders started July 11th, and the book is expected to be out August 3rd. That's our release date. And barring any surprises, we will have copies at Gen Con, at the booth at Gen Con. So and we'll have Lower Decks there too. So if you're anxious to get some new Star Trek stuff, we should have it there. I can't promise 100% positive because I can't control, the boats or the rails or the airplanes or all that stuff. Like, my part of the job done. I've delivered the book to the printers. The printers have delivered it to distribution and logistics, and now we're just waiting for it to actually arrive. So
Sure.
But you know, if it's not at Gen Con for whatever reason, it will be hitting mailboxes and stores in August. Like, I mean, Gen Con's the very first week of August, right? And it's actually super early because August 1st is a Tuesday, I think, or Monday or something. So it's literally that first week of August. Very first week of August is Gen Con this year. But yeah, so this is again an experiment for us. Normally we have a longer lead time for pre-orders and announcements and stuff, and so we're announcing this the same day we're putting it up on pre-order, just to see how fans react to that immediate call to action. Like, here's this cool new product, go buy it if you're interested. You know, you don't have to wait. You don't, like with Lower Decks, we made you wait. We said, okay, here's this awesome book coming. In the meantime, here's a couple digital supplements you can whet your appetite with. But the pre-order came a little bit later, which is fine because that's, you know, one strategy. We're trying a different strategy with this one just to see what's possible, you know. So I'm just excited to hear how it goes. And I'm also excited. I think we're hoping to talk again soon about the book in a more detailed fashion, you know, yes, chapter by chapter. And I'm super excited for that because I want to make sure you guys have time to digest it, you know, no pun intended, get a feel for it, come up with some more questions, and then we'll deluge the fans with another long conversation about it, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I can't wait to share with you next time my fan fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. I can't wait. Like, we're so spoiled. Like, not to give you an aside, but like in this day and age, there are so many tools available to creative people and to gamers and to fanfic writers and stuff. Like, you know, I think back to the early 80s and 90s even, when I was learning how to write and learning how to do fan fiction and how to do my own campaigns and stuff. Like even just the graphical tools weren't where they are now, right? So to where like somebody now could write a story with Captain's Log, and they could go log into Star Trek Online and create a picture of their character, right? Yeah. Or they can find there's a whole bunch of fans who created their own like token programs where you can create a token of your character by selecting the uniform and the hairstyle and the facial features and all that stuff. And it's amazing the wealth of creative material that's available now. Even like ships too. Like there's a lot of ship creators out there. There's a lot of fan art out there. There's even some really great professional grade like CGI starship art out there now if you know where to look. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know, I could create a character and create a ship, and probably within like, you know, 10 minutes of searching the internet, I could find the perfect picture, the perfect token, and the perfect ship. And like that visual material will help spark my creativity even more. And then if you were able, like, or if a fan was able to put all that together into like a blog or some sort of, I'm sure they're out there. I don't even know what they look like yet because I haven't done enough research. Like if you were able to create like a story template, and you have your character picture and your ship and maybe like a Starfield background or something, right? And then just pick your font, and then you're telling stories. You're just using the game to help create stories, and like that's a graphical interface and a graphical capability that we just didn't have, you know, 20, 30 years ago, because that's where the internet is now, right? So I'm just excited just to see what happens and what other tools are out there that I'm not even aware of that people will bring in to tell their own Star Trek stories. So anyway, you can tell I'm excited, but we'll just see.
It's pretty exciting.
It is very exciting. Yeah,
we're pretty excited. We're pretty excited. I can't wait to dive further into it. You know, roll myself up a character and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. I can't wait to hear your reactions next time we get together. So please don't hold back. Like, I'm eager to hear just how it's working, how it's not working, etc., so that we can you know, iterate next time.
All right.
All right. Oh, viewers, so stay tuned. We're gonna do as you heard, a second video where we'll go more deeper into the book, chapter by chapter, as well as share our own stories. So everyone out there, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.